Okay, this is going to be the first video in our medical immunology series. In this one, we're mainly going to go over a general introduction to medical immunology. We're going to cover some stuff on the microbiome, and we're going to talk about portals of entry for pathogens, as well as modes of transmission, and we're going to talk a bit about pathogen diversity. So, the human body is constantly exposed to pathogens throughout our lives, but we rarely suffer the symptoms of widespread infection. We don't suffer these symptoms as a result of our innate immune systems. Immunology is the study of the physiological mechanisms that humans use to defend themselves from infection. So the mechanisms of the innate and acquired immune system. So talking about why we don't get infected all the time, we have a lot of barriers defending ourselves from pathogens like the dermis, the skin, which prevents pathogens from kind of entering our cells, as well as stuff like white blood cells and other systems and precautions in place to stop pathogens. So humans have historically used vaccination in the form of weaker strains or damaged pathogens to activate our acquired immune systems. So for the example of smallpox I put on the right, even before we had a good understanding of microbiology and how to actually properly vaccinate ourselves, people did this process called variolation, where they took the scabs of the smallpox lesions from people who probably died of smallpox. They ground these scabs up into a powder and inhaled them, or they rubbed them onto open lesions on their skin. So say they've got a cut on their finger, they would rub these scabs into that cut, or they'd inhale them. And what this would do, this would inoculate them against the smallpox virus, because these the scabs would contain kind of decaying dead smallpox microbes with the proteins on their cell walls that would be picked up as epitopes in our immune system by T cells and B cells, and produce an adaptive immune response, and they would end up with these memory B cells, plasma cells, that could produce antibodies that were complementary to the proteins on the smallpox virus. So if they ever got infected by smallpox, they would have the memory B cells there to protect themselves from the infection. The immune response to infection may be too weak, as the case with immunodeficiency, or too strong, which we see if someone gets sepsis or if they have a autoimmune disease. Humans are most susceptible to pathogens as young children because young children lack a extensive acquired immune system with lots of memory B cells that would give them resistance to lots of different viruses. They don't have that yet, so they're in a compromised state. And we're most susceptible at old age because we have compromised immune systems just from the natural effects of aging. Moving on to the microbiome, the human body is host to millions of beneficial as well as neutral microbes. These microbes act as a source of endogenous infection. This basically means the harmless bacteria of our microbiome take up space and they consume food that could otherwise be colonized or eaten by harmful pathogens. So just the fact that we have a lot of these beneficial and neutral microbes in our body, it stops the spread of harmful pathogens and it decreases our likelihood of infection. These microbes of our microbiome also block host receptors, and they inhibit growth of the harmful pathogens by expelling waste products called antimicrobial factors that aid in host immunity. So that's pretty good. Our microbiome, so these random beneficial and neutral microbes that we have all throughout our body, they act as one of our lines of defense against pathogenic infection. Our bodies also receive some essential nutrients from these microbes. For example, niacin, thiamine, riboflavin, and vitamin K are some of the examples that you might want to note down. Despite being generally harmless, these microbes in our microbiome can cause disease, but this is very rare if the host immunological defenses are not intact. So, for example, if we have something wrong with us or we have a compromised immune system, we are the microbes in our microbiome that are usually beneficial and neutral, they can become pathogenic. And when this happens, we call the infection an opportunistic infection. And like I said, they tend to happen in individuals with compromised immune systems. So some things that can compromise our immune system: broken anatomical defenses like the skin, the dermis, reduced immunological defenses. So if people are malnourished or old and they're not producing as many T cells or B cells or leukocytes as they ought to be, or microbes introduced to a specific site in our body may originally come from a different site in our body, and when they kind of move from one site to another, it can cause one of these opportunistic infections. So say we take a microbe from our intestines, and for some reason, like if we take antibiotics which can disrupt the microflora, this intestinal microbe moves all the way to, I don't know, our lymphatic system or something. It could cause an infection. I just use the lymphatic system as an example, I don't know. We have lots of different kinds of pathogens, so microorganisms capable of causing infection are called pathogens. I'm sure you already know that. Some of them include bacteria, viruses, and fungi, which are the most common ones. I've just included an Ophiocordyceps infecting a grasshopper on the right there. Parasitic infections like that of Platyhelminthes, which I have shown here. It's the roundworms, flukes, tapeworms, and thorny-headed worms. And then prions, which is this protein structure in the middle here, the thing in the blue-red kind of ribbon thing. These are very rare. These are basically dysfunctional. They're misfolded proteins that result in other proteins in our body also becoming misfolded, so they become non-functional, and they can be a problem, but they're very rare. Infectious microorganisms are called pathogens, like we just said, and they proliferate in vast numbers during an infection, and then the host responds by activating our innate immune cells and acquired immune cells. These pathogens can either proliferate, so multiply extracellularly, which tends to happen in larger pathogens, so bacteria, fungi, protists. It just means they're multiplying outside of the cells, so in the extracellular matrix or something. Or intracellular proliferation, where the pathogens are replicating within the cells, within the cytoplasm. They tend to be smaller viruses, or they can also be some small bacteria. For example, mycobacteria proliferate within the vesicles of macrophages, which are a type of innate immune cell called, and this is the case with tuberculosis.